Welcome to Grieving Out Loud. On this episode, we'll explore the depths of grief and journey to healing. I'm your host, Angela Kennecke, and today we have a truly inspiring guest joining us. Eric Hodgdon suffered unimaginable pain of losing his beloved daughter Zoe to suicide at the age of 15.
When the ER doctor told me that he did everything he could, but he couldn't bring her back, and even if he did, she'd be brain dead, I just said, oh no. And he just turned around and said, call time 11:25 p.m. What do you do? What do you do in that moment, Angela? You can't fix anything at that point. You can't reverse. An hour earlier, I was talking to her, and an hour later, there's nothing.
Eric's grief was all-consuming, shattering his world and leaving him unable to eat, sleep, or find relief from the phantom pains that haunted him. But as time passed, he found the strength within to confront his grief head-on and live beyond his loss. As an author, coach, and TEDx speaker, Eric now helps others going through a difficult loss.
We are all the same. It doesn't matter what we do for work. It doesn't matter how much money we have in the bank. It doesn't matter what our socioeconomic status is. We're human, and we all will experience the loss of a loved one.
Join us as we delve into his remarkable story of resilience, discussing practical tips and strategies to overcome grief, regardless of its form. Whether you've experienced the loss of a loved one, a marriage, a job, or any other profound loss, Eric's words will resonate and hopefully offer peace. This is Grieving Out Loud. Let's begin. Eric, first of all, welcome to the podcast. I am so grateful that you're joining me today.
Thank you, Angela. I'm really honored to be here speaking with you about this very important topic. So thank you.
I'm so sorry that we come together as parents who lost children and both who died in a rather stigmatized way. It's a very difficult thing to accept, but I want to just dive right into your story and your daughter, Zoe, who was 15 when she died.
Yes. Zoe was a wallflower, just salt of the earth, old soul, beautiful child, just was curious, wanted deep connections with others. And around the age of 12 to 13, things began to shift. She was entering those tween years. And I think that she started to see more of what, the innocence being lost and the realities of our world kind of coming into view. And I think that it scared her in a lot of ways. And so she, like other kids, started to struggle with identity, not so much gender identity, but more or less just, who is she? Why am I here? What's my purpose for being here? And it caused some challenges internally with Zoe. And for the most part, she kept quiet about it. I wouldn't say depressed, just quiet. Her artwork, she was very much into art and music, and those were some outlets for her. And I'm very grateful that she's been able to have some of her voice and music written and actually recorded. And I'm just so grateful for that because I get to hear her voice whenever I'm in the mood to listen to it. And that's quite often. But Zoe was struggling for a while. She had entered some adolescent psychiatric units for some counseling and just to kind of get herself back on her feet.
Had she been diagnosed with a condition?
No, I think that the way the doctors were talking was that it was more of an episodic type of situation, that there were some struggles just in general with her age, with communications with other family members that were, I think, strained at the time. And it was something that she was just working through. And I think at that age, when you're 15 years old, you're not thinking about the long-term future. You're thinking about the next hour ahead of you at most. And so I think that she was just maybe placing some of the blame on herself. It's that puzzle you can't complete. You can maybe put some pieces together, but you're never going to have the full picture as to what was really going on.
Amidst Zoe's ongoing battle with mental health issues, she was able to come home and visit her dad for a weekend. Eric eagerly anticipated the visit, envisioning it as a time filled with joy and connection. However, little did he know that this seemingly ordinary weekend would eventually unfold into the most devastating day of his life.
She was upstairs listening to some music, playing her ukulele, and she was applying this really cool henna tattoo on her hand. And I asked her if she wanted to hang out with some friends. And she's like, I don't have any friends, Dad. I'm like, okay, I would beg to differ, but okay, no worries. What do you want to do then? Do you want to make some food? She's like, yeah, let's do that. And so we made some steak and kale chips. Those were her favorites. And so afterwards we were cleaning up. She said, Dad, I'm going to go to bed. I'm kind of tired. And I said, okay, Pumpkins, I love you. And she said, I love you too, Dad. And I went back to my computer to do some work. I came back upstairs a little while later and I opened her bedroom door and I noticed she wasn't in her bed and she was in her closet. And I had to call 911. The next 45 minutes are vivid but a blur at the same time. And when the ER doctor told me that he did everything he could, but he couldn't bring her back, and even if he did, she'd be brain dead, I just said, oh no. And he just turned around and said, call time, 11:25 p.m. What do you do? What do you do in that moment, Angela? You can't fix anything at that point. You can't reverse. An hour earlier, I was talking to her, and an hour later, there's nothing.
The rug gets pulled out from under you. It's like the whole world suddenly is turned upside down. It's like nothing you ever knew will ever be the same again. I don't wish this experience on anybody, the loss of a child, whether it be like in my daughter's case to fentanyl poisoning, where she was using a drug she should not have been using, or in your daughter's case to suicide. I don't wish that on any soul in the world.
Right.
But you will not know until you've experienced that moment where you lose your child, what that feels like. And I'm sure it varies from person to person a little bit, but it's the shock, it's the devastation, it's the having to grapple with reality.
Right. And that's, I think, very difficult for people to try to make sense of what just happened because it doesn't feel real. It's so unbelievably unreal and surreal that the reality of the situation is blurred by the emotions that you're feeling and the tremendous sense of loss, anger, frustration, any other emotion that you're feeling in that. And I can imagine for you, Angela, with going through the same similar set of emotions, obviously it's your own unique experience of losing your daughter. But when you were faced with that same situation, it feels like you're just standing in a crater.
That you can never climb out of. That is the thing. It feels like your whole world is just sort of crumbled around you.
Mm-hmm.
You feel as you should keep going on. For me, it was my other children, my husband, those kinds of things. But
yes,
I didn't want to.
Right. You don't want to. Absolutely. What's interesting is that week afterwards, my house was filled with all of Zoe's friends.
And she said she didn't have any, right?
Yeah, I
know.
So
she wasn't thinking clearly, right? So her mind was not.
Yeah, I have a very small house and maybe 1,100 square feet at the time and 2 bedrooms, just a very small little house. But there was 40 people in that household and it didn't feel like there was enough of them there. They stayed over the entire week. I had a den and there were sleeping bags everywhere. I didn't care how late they stayed up. I didn't care how much noise they made. It just felt like Zoe, that her energy was there because collectively, all of her friends reminded me of her in some way. And she impacted them so much. And she gave them hope. And she gave them so much of herself and a good soul and just a good person that I think that's how we all felt reconnected to Zoe in that moment. And it helped all of us. That was the key for me to move forward in those early days and weeks after losing her.
And I tried to explain to somebody who's never lost a child recently, who told me it was time to move on, that someone that she knew had lost a child and had moved on. And I just kind of said, you never really move on. You can move forward, though. Yes. Her response was it's the same thing, but I have to argue that it's not, that you have moved forward beautifully. I mean, I watched your TEDx talk. I was very moved by it, started to cry. I just think some of the things you're doing and our beliefs, I think our mindsets are very similar in the fact that you have to reclaim a purpose in your life. It may not be the same purpose that you had before this happened.
Absolutely.
But you have to go on. You can't just survive each day, right? We're still here. We're still here for a reason, I believe.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I appreciate you calling that out, Angela, in terms of having some similar experiences in not just surviving, but getting back up and eventually living beyond the loss. I feel like when we are able to move past that survival mode. Because survival mode is meant to be temporary. It's not meant to be something that carries us till the end of our days. Because that's a lot, that's an abyss of itself.
Yeah, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I might have to live another 20 or 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking that in my head.
Yeah.
After I lost my daughter, I thought,
Yes.
how am I ever going to do that?
Yeah.
So I think those are the early initial stages of loss where you do feel like it is just about survival and you don't know how could you even laugh again or
Right.
face that many years without the person, the child that you love.
And that can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
That can be something that can stop you in your tracks. Those are those moments when you wake up in the middle of the night and that flashes in your head and you're just jolted awake and your heart starts racing. And it could be an emotional response that you're having right then too. But I think that's also your brain and your mind trying to reconnect with some sort of purpose to carry on. And it's a healing element that your brain goes through. But I think as time goes by, and it's not just time, because time isn't the driver of your healing, it's a companion. But I believe that with time and action and taking those deep breaths and knowing that you're going to get through those moments where the grief is just overwhelming you, it's going to pass. It has passed previously. It's going to pass again. And when you have that moment happen again in the future, it's also going to pass. It may not feel like it right then and there, but it is acknowledging that you're going through a process. It's not something, to your point about just, why aren't you over this yet? Can't you just move on? It takes that time, those actions, and that energy that is needed for this to carry you forward. That becomes the vehicle to help you through this.
After the early days,
Mhm.
after the first few weeks or months after Zoe died, which was in 2014, is that right?
Yes.
So you're a little bit ahead of me in this grief journey. And after some time had passed, what was going on with you and what helped you the most?
Where I was I had gone through a divorce about 7 years prior to that. And in my mind, I almost felt as if the divorce were harder than losing Zoe, only because I didn't have any coping skills when I was going through my divorce. It was the first major setback in my life where I just was not sure how to get back up from that. And through years of therapy, I, experienced the loss of my daughter, and I had tools now to cope with it. I could recognize what I was going through. However, it doesn't mean that it still wasn't impacting me. So I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I had phantom pains in my body that I couldn't explain where they came from, that lasted for months at a time. One would disappear, another one would show up. I had very intrusive thoughts about where Zoe was or what my life was going to be like moving forward. But on the flip side, on the positive side, I was connecting with Zoe's friends. I was finding connection with other family members and new people that I was meeting who were also on this journey. I was finding, as I call them, gifts along the way. Maybe there were signs from Zoe. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was a little trinket or something that I would find to be like, okay, it's got to be Zoe showing up and saying, hi, Dad, it's all good. And so the first few months of the journey were all about reconnecting, hopefully, to myself and to the world around me. But it was also understanding that of what matters most in this world. That became ultra clear. Like, this jolted me into this new reality of, okay, well, my IT career, that's not important. That's a job. That's a means to an end, right? But what matters most is family, relationships, love. And that's something that can't be bought. You can't go to work for that. It's just something that is part of the human experience, and it's beautiful. That's what matters most.
Yeah, I do believe that's what loss can teach us.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly worked very hard in my career as a broadcast journalist for many, many years. And not that it didn't have any importance to me, but it certainly wasn't the most important thing. I also feel like you get to a certain age and you start to realize you need to foster and build relationships. That's what's important kind of with that second half of your life, right?
Absolutely.
And I think loss can just speed that up, maybe that process up. But yeah, I had very similar thoughts and experiences where those thoughts are so intrusive at first. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the physical pain the way you did, how kind of the emotional pain manifesting itself physically.
Right.
But I had what I felt like was brain damage. I mean, like I couldn't remember things.
Yes.
I mean, I felt like I had a brain injury.
Yes.
And that was so hard, especially because my job required me to be quick thinking.
Right.
And so I struggled with that a little bit. But I also think the signs you're talking about, I have not talked to any parent or even anybody who's lost anyone very, very close to them who hasn't received signs. And you could arguably say they were coincidences. You could explain them away in some way. But I had a grief counselor tell me once, what does it hurt? I mean, believe that they are signs. And if that makes your soul feel good, then go with that. And I do think as I progress down this journey that sometimes I would say, well, that I could probably explain that away and why.
Right.
I don't need to do that, you know? And some have been like, hit me over the head, like, how can I explain that away? You know?
Yeah. I had a very similar experience with that, Angela, if it's okay if I share that with you.
Sure, of course, please do.
It was about 15 months after Zoe had died, and I was at my first trade show for the company I was working with. It was out in LA. And I'd always wanted to get out to LA. I'd never been out there before. And the trade show lasted about a week. I was responsible, being the IT guy, to stay and make sure that all of the trade show booth and all the technology, everything that was packaged up, got sent back okay. And the lead of our group left early and left me the rental car that he had rented in case they needed to do any errands, and they didn't. And so it was my task to bring the rental car back the next day. First, I was a little bit frustrated, but then I'm like, wait a minute, I have a gassed up Jeep in LA and I don't have to pay for it. I'm going to go travel around and see what I can see. And so I found myself at Santa Monica Beach. And I don't know if you've ever been there or not. It's a beautiful beach. Yeah, it's very wide, but it's also very deep in terms of from the roadway to get to the water. You have to walk a while. And I had made a pact with Zoe after she had died that any trip that I took, I was going to find a rock at that location and bring it back and put it in her room, set it on a shelf in her room, and tell her a little story about where the rock was found. And so this was no different. And this was the first business trip that I had taken. And so that collection of rocks was very small at the time, but I started to walk along the beach. Well, here's the problem. There's no rocks on Santa Monica Beach. It's mostly sand, and there's no shells. There's a little bit of shells. They're tiny little clam shells, but I was walking about 5 minutes in one direction and I finally found a small rock. I'm like, okay, it didn't look great. It wasn't anything special. It was a rock. And so I put it in my pocket and I zigzagged another direction for another 5 minutes. And I found another rock. This was a little bit long, thin, knife-like rock. And I made my way down to the water. I wanted to put my feet in the Pacific. And so I found 2 more rocks. I put them in my pocket and I get down to the water. And this was late May, early June, where you've got that May rain, June gloom right at the coast where it's overcast. And it was exactly the way it was that day. There was nobody there on the beach. There was one person way down, probably about a half a mile down, sitting in a chair, just facing the water, probably some celebrity, but I didn't want to bother them. Anyway, and so I just sat there and I thought, oh my gosh, Zoe was a big Red Hot Chili Peppers fan. They were from Santa Monica. She would absolutely love to be here. And I said that to her, Zoe, you would absolutely love it here. I wish you were here. And I stayed there for probably another 15 minutes or so, took some pictures of just the beach area, went back to my Jeep, went back to the hotel, and I take the rocks out of my pocket and I put them on the desk and I moved 2 of them and I sat down on the bed and started crying because they spelled her name. Oh. And I am not that creative, Angela. I just burst out like, okay, what that told me was that she was there with me. And just the vastness of that beach, the distance I had to walk to find those 4 rocks, and her showing up like that to say, Dad, I am there. It's okay. I still have those rocks. They're in my bedroom. They're on a shelf. And I look at them every morning and I'm just like, she is always here with me.
That's incredible. That's an incredible story. And I love it.
If you head over to our podcast page on our website, emily'shope.charity, you'll be able to see a picture of the rocks that spell Zoe. It's such a powerful visual symbol of love that will truly touch your heart. While you're there, be sure to dive into the resources we've gathered for those navigating grief or facing challenges with substance use. And our website always has the latest news stories on these topics. You can stay in the know and even discover ways to get involved in our mission Together, we can create positive change.
And I also think that our daughters are with us. They're in our hearts, right? So they were a part of us. And
how do you connect with Emily today?
I talk to her. I do a lot of work in her name, especially with her art. We use her art in a lot of ways, and I feel very connected to her that way. And there are songs and other things, where I feel very connected to her. I just have to have my time, to be connected with her, because we can all get really busy, right?
Yes.
It's funny how, like, at first you kind of keep life at bay for a little while after that loss, and then life starts intruding. Even though I'm working on a charity having to do with how she died and trying to save other people, I'm still really busy with other people, right? So, yeah. And I know you wrote a book and you called it A Sherpa Named Zoe.
Yes.
So why did you name it that?
That's a really great question. I struggled with that for the longest time when I was writing. I wanted to share the experience of going through grief. I had so many stories of Zoe and my experience in those leading up to Zoe passing, and then afterwards moving through those difficult moments, like the physical, like you're talking, the emotional, the questions that you ask, all of that. And every single time that I had an experience where I felt like I was reconnected to Zoe in a different way, because I believed I was actually going to be able to talk to Zoe like you and I are talking right here. And when that silence is so deafening that you don't have that connection any longer, you have to guide yourself. No one else is coming to carry you on this journey. They might walk with you on the journey, but they can't do the work. They can't take the time, they take those actions. And so I realized that Zoe had been my guide, not only while she was here, but afterwards. It was potentially those signs. It was potentially some meditations that I had where she would show up and be very clear about how she's doing okay. I'm good, Dad. I'm in the best place. There's no pain. There's no time here. But it was also just in the people that I've met that I wouldn't have met had she'd still been here. You and I probably wouldn't be talking if she was still here. And so I've just met so many wonderful people and found new relationships. I feel like these are the gifts that were left behind. And any journey that we take, we find things along the way that help us get to where we want to go. And I realize that grief is not a destination. It is a journey, and you're going to be on that journey until you take your last breath. But there are some really good things that happen on this journey that help you heal. And the lessons that you can learn about yourself and how to be with other people and how to help other people are just so powerful. And that's what I wanted to put in the book. I wanted to show people that this is the worst thing that you're ever going to have to probably deal with in life, whether it's a child or a sibling or a parent or a friend, anything. You think you're prepared for loss, but you're really not, because of everything that goes along with that you can't quantify or just wrap up into a single statement. Well, you can. It sucks. Grief sucks. So
it does suck.
It sucks.
I'm with you on that. It sucks.
Yeah.
I have to say, though, when you were talking about these gifts that come from grief, that come from loss, it was so interesting to me. I was taking part in a grief group that we started, and it's mostly mothers right now for people who've lost someone to overdose or fentanyl poisoning. And the counselor who was leading it asked us to write about what has changed within us, what has changed externally. And almost everything I wrote was positive. And then I just thought, well, it's good, but it's also horrible to think that, I would take her back in a second, right? I mean, but there are positive things if you allow it, if you let it, that can come out of loss.
Absolutely. I imagine when you are reconnected with Emily and you're having a conversation with her about everything that you've experienced since the day she left this earth, this realm, and what you're going to be able to share with her and what she's going to be able to share with you. And it's going to be such a powerful reunion. And I feel the same way that Zoe and I, when I sit down, Zoe, let me tell you where I've gone and who I've seen, who I've met, and what I've learned on this journey of not only getting through this for myself, but helping other people to navigate this, just like you're doing with those other mothers who've lost a child to an overdose. And I just feel like that is something that we as humans are here to do is to make our fellow humans better in some way on their journey, or to help them in some way on their journey. Even if it's the smallest little thing, Angela, that helps somebody to either to get unstuck, to move forward, or to even take a bigger step forward that they didn't think they could take. Well, geez, if Angela can do it, so can I. If Eric can get back up and help other people who are struggling with the loss of a child to suicide, maybe I can get back up and find a way to carry on too. And that's my hope. And that sounds like that's the hope of your mission as well.
Yeah, certainly. I just to try to prevent it from happening to other people. But one question I have when it comes to death by suicide, I think a lot about these stigmatized deaths, as I've talked about fentanyl poisoning, overdose, suicide. Also the guilt many parents feel, like would have, could have, should have, or, just the idea that we could have somehow controlled the situation. And I think that can be especially prevalent with suicide. So did you ever have any of those feelings? And then how did you deal with them?
That's a really good question. I wish I could have pulled Zoe back from the brink. I wish I would have known more about what was really going on inside of her mind at the time. I'm always about finding solutions to problems, and I believe Zoe found a solution to what she was feeling.
Have you lost a loved one to overdose or fentanyl poisoning? I'd like to invite you to share their story on our new Emily's Hope Memorial website called More Than Just a Number. They were our children, siblings, cousins, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, and friends. So much more than just a number. You can submit a memorial today on morethanjustanumber.org.
And while I know that maybe brought her peace, it didn't bring so much peace to our family and her friends. But in the journey that we've taken since then, we've found that peace. And so it's a very unique situation to navigate. And whether you're trying to do some prevention for people taking their lives or postvention when it's happened, and how you help somebody reconnect with themselves and life to carry on and to keep going.
I think you just offering that glimmer of peace. If someone who's listening to this podcast thinks, how will I ever get to that point where I can be at peace with this?
Right.
No?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people they may hear this and be like, oh, I can't get there. Are you kidding me? I just lost this person. There's absolutely no way I'm ever going to feel better again. There's no way that I'm ever going to be the same again. And what I'm going to say to that is that you're absolutely right. You're never going to be the same again. You can actually become stronger because of this. Any situation that we have in life, it doesn't matter if we've lost a loved one, it doesn't matter if we've lost a job, it doesn't matter if we've lost a relationship. What happens and what has happened in the past can be some momentum and some fuel for you to find a way to get back up and move forward in any of these situations. It may just be more difficult with the loss of a loved one because there's probably more emotions associated with that. Yeah.
And I think giving yourself some grace, being kind to yourself and giving yourself time. It's not like this happened for you overnight,
No. If you set a timeline, you're going to be disappointed when you hit that 6-month mark or that 3-month mark and you're not feeling the way you think you should be feeling. You're absolutely right, Angela. You got to give yourself some grace to figure it out. Some people can heal maybe sooner, but that's their journey. Your journey is yours, and it's okay to take as much time as you need to figure out what you need to get back up and to keep going at your level. Even though I went through a divorce, it took me 3 years to really get back to a place of feeling okay. After I lost Zoe, I would say it was a good 2 years before I really started to feel like I got my feet beneath me to get back up. I had moments when things were briefly okay, where I didn't feel immense pain and sadness and anger or guilt or whatever the emotion I was feeling. But it took a while for that to become more consistent, to where I had those consistent better days. And now it was off to the races because I knew what I needed to do in order to then live and reconnect with myself, to live beyond the loss, to honor Zoe and myself at the same time, because it's okay to do that.
I love that, to live beyond the loss and to honor to honor yourself, but to still honor your daughter, but not to get stuck or trapped in the grief, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a hard road to navigate.
It is. It is.
Time is a companion. I also like when you said that. That was something that really resonates with me, that time is not a healer.
Right.
It is a companion on this journey.
Yes. And I think if you can couple time with taking some action, doesn't have to be anything major. Maybe it's you getting up in the morning, putting your feet on the ground, deciding to do something to honor your loved one for yourself, whether that's going for a walk at the beach or walk at the park, maybe hanging out with a friend, taking care of yourself, going to a yoga class. It doesn't matter what you choose to do. Or picking up a journal and writing 3 things that you're grateful for that day, 3 things or 1 thing that you forgive yourself for, and accepting what is can help kind of dump off that feeling of being stuck and to help you move forward. Yeah.
So is this your life's work now? Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I know you've written a book, you've done the TEDx talk. Are you working with people who grieve? Is this what you're doing?
Yes. And I appreciate that question. I was working with one of my mentors a few months ago, and initially I wanted to do some speaking and coaching on grief. And I was fortunate to have connected with Sheryl Sandberg a few years ago through Option B. And we've had a few conversations, and I felt like, okay, she had lost her husband, Dave. They were on vacation in Cancun, and she had written this wonderful book called Option B, and she had created this community on Facebook called the same thing. And it almost like it confirmed that this was my journey when it was approaching Mother's Day. And I just went on the group and I did a live video for 2 minutes saying exactly just what I said a few minutes ago in terms of, get up in the morning. It's okay to do something for yourself. If you're missing your mom or mother figure, or you're a mom that is missing a child, get up, put your feet on the ground, go and do something that honors your loved one today, because it's okay to do that. And Sheryl reached out and said, hey, I'd love to talk about this on some interviews and some other things. Is it okay if I do that? Sure.
You're not going to tell Sheryl Sandberg no?
No, but what it showed me, and you're right, but what it showed me, Angela, was that we are all the same. It doesn't matter what we do for work. It doesn't matter how much money we have in the bank. It doesn't matter what our socioeconomic status is. We're human, and we all will experience the loss of a loved one. And it just reinforced that this work is so very powerful. It's needed. Sheryl Sandberg, who has as much resources as she possibly needs, she was already working with Adam Grant, who's a doctor. They had already written the book, and so she'd already gone through that. But this particular Mother's Day, just one little thing that I said was able to help her navigate that Mother's Day. And so it's like, okay, I am on a mission now to help people get up and live beyond the loss so that they can get reconnected to their lives and honor themselves and their loved ones at the same time.
Yeah, our culture does a really poor job of allowing us to be open about our feelings. Don't talk about it, move on, go back to work, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. A few months after Zoe died, and I was at the cemetery visiting her resting place, and I went often, and there was a woman who was an older woman walking towards me, and I think she was there visiting a resting place of somebody that she knew. And she stopped. She said, I'm so sorry for your loss. I said, thank you. And she's like, who is this? I said, unfortunately, it's my daughter. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. What happened? Do you mind me asking? I said, unfortunately, she took her life. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. But you're young. You can have more kids.
For one thing not to say,
right?
Someone who's lost a child.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I imagine Zoe standing in front of me, just kind of looking at me like, did she just say that? And so I didn't get angry with her. I think she recognized that what she had said was probably not the greatest thing to say. And she just, okay, well, have a good night. And she kind of carried on and went back to her car and left. And I just kind of sat there and chuckled for a little bit. We all process and deal with grief differently. I don't know anything about her past or her history or how she's dealt with loss in the past, but it is a very challenging situation to go through. And there's no one right way to do it. It's the way that works for you.
Right. And if you allow it, it can make you stronger.
Absolutely.
And it can make you a better person. And it can make you more compassionate. And all of these things, if you allow it.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Well, I have just so much enjoyed this conversation, Eric. I just want to tell you again, I wish I would have been able to meet Zoe because she sounds amazing. And I am so sorry for your loss. And I am so grateful for all the work that you're doing.
And thank you so much. I'm so sorry for your loss as well. I hope that Emily is just flourishing where she is right now. And it sounds like she is. And I just appreciative to be able to share Zoe with your listeners. And I hope this messaging helps them in some way to get unstuck or to move forward just one little step. So thank you so much. I appreciate it, Angela.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, be sure to check out the show notes for this episode, where you'll find links to Eric's inspiring TEDx talk and information about his book. They offer resources for those seeking help on their own healing journeys. Thank you for joining us today on Grieving Out Loud. We do appreciate your support. Please consider giving this podcast a positive review and sharing it with others. Also, make sure to tune in next week as we sit down with a licensed professional counselor working in one of the nation's poorest areas ravaged by the drug epidemic. Her profound insights shed light on the human spirit's resilience in the face of adversity. It's an interview you won't want to miss. Once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage. This podcast is produced by Casey Wonnenberg King and Anna Fye.